The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. The reasons why children end up on the streets are complex. Often their arrival represents an active decision on their part in response to serious rights violations at home, says Moses Ogutu in Under the Bridge, The Invisible Lives of Street Children. Ogutu was a child of the street for 5 years. Today, he is an international business and trade lecturer at the African Leadershi University and a 2017 Mandela Rhodes Scholar. Ogutu's life journey is proof that children who end up on the street can and do rise above the challenges they face. Ogutu points out that homelessness among youth is a global problem, and in each jurisdiction, the reasons a child arrives on the street are both individual and eerily similar worldwide. Krista Thompson, the past CEO of Vancouver's Covenant House, agrees. She says there are many reasons and many successful intervention strategies that work to help young people who clearly have smarts and grit and problem-solving abilities to move forward toward a more positive future. One such strategy is Relentless Support, a program that Covenant House offers. I invited Krista Thompson to join me for a conversation that matters about ensuring young people are not forgotten, are visible, and supported to grow, develop, and most importantly, realize their potential. Krista, welcome.
Thanks, Stu.
I think all of us, when we see a young person living on the street, have to be very careful that we don't go, oh, well, there's a lost life, because that's not a foregone conclusion, is it?
It's not. Absolutely not. And, with a couple of, interventions, the trajectory can be very different. And if you can kind of interact at a moment in time in a young person's life, you can change the trajectory of that young person's life. We've seen it, we do it. And, always trying to do more of it. Young people are, they've never sat down and said, I want to be a homeless person. Didn't happen. So, they're there for a whole variety of reasons. And, poverty's often right at the top of the list, which has led to somehow family breakdown, which is second on the list. Experience with government care is probably 50% of the time a young person's been in care. And the common thread is that most of those young people on the street are simply detached from a system, from school, and from family. And it's up to them to disclose what happened to them so that they became detached, because through no fault of their own, they find themselves where they are.
Clearly, they have a will to survive, though, because they've said, I'm going to leave something that is worse than being on the street. We might look at them as being cast adrift, but maybe it is their first act of acknowledgement of the challenges that are in the environment that they're living in, and they're taking that first step forward. It may not look like it's a positive step to many people, but that very act may be their first, I'm standing up for myself act.
Survival instincts are strong, right, in all of us. But I think particularly when you've been, from a young age, you've been in, let's say, an unstable environment or a dangerous environment, and you really feel no other choice but to leave the situation. And if the street or couch surfing or whatever option they choose is better than home, then you got to know that home is probably a pretty bad place. And that's not always the case, but it often is. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that I often feel like I must remind people of is that, a homeless kid is the least interesting thing about a homeless kid is that they're homeless.
Right.
Really.
Yeah.
I mean, and they come from all walks of life. So at any one given day at Covenant House, Vancouver, there's a young person who is a refugee with no history of drug abuse, is a LGBTQ youth who has been shunned by their family and no longer has a place to live. That happens close to home and regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And a young Indigenous person who's left their Northern Reserve to find family who is somewhere in Vancouver. That's another often occurrence. In many cases, it's family breakdown, and the remaining parent or the parents can't cope because of their own mental health concerns, / poverty, / poor coping skills, / lack of education, and on and on.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So, how do you then intervene in a way that that a young person can appreciate and understand? And I asked that question from a fantastic, little story that I once heard about someone who was in great trouble, and they needed help. And an unlikely source came to them. And they said, "Why are you helping me?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to tell you a little story about a guy who's walking along the street. And there's a manhole with the cover that's off, but there's no markings around there. And the guy falls down the hole. And he's down in the hole and he's yelling, 'Help, help, I've fallen down this hole and I can't get out.' And a priest comes by and says, well, say 3 Hail Marys. And, and then the priest goes on his way. He goes, 'But I'm still down in the hole.' And then a doctor comes along and the doctor writes a prescription. And the person says, 'Well, I'm still down in the hole.' And then a friend comes along. And I always get a little choked up when I tell this story. Friend jumps in the hole.
Yeah.
And they go, 'What are you doing down here?' 'Dan, we're both in the hole.' And the friend says, 'I know, but I've been here before.
Yeah.
And I know the way out.
Yeah.
Follow me.' Like, how important is it that when you're seeking help, you seek it from somebody who has been there?
Well, I think I think having been there, or at least having some, a measure of empathy is so important, right?
Right.
The thing is that, many of these young people have not actually had a friend.
Yeah.
They haven't had a trustworthy adult in their life, ever.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Or if they did, that person is gone for some reason. And so trust is a very difficult thing to earn with a young person who's been through some traumatic event, often at the hands of the people that are supposed to be looking after them. So that, it takes a lot of courage to walk up to a doorway, like Covenant House's doorway, and walk inside and go, "I need help." Like, how many times, do you have an easy time asking for help? Right. Kids are the same thing. They're proud. They are scared. Often their health isn't good, and they don't trust anybody. Right. So we have to work really, really hard to make sure that we are where they are, number one, so they can, sort of encounter us just walking down the street. We're just where they are. We have to be sure that what we say we're going to do, we do. We have to be sure that our buildings and our staff are highly trained to understand, what trauma does to a young person and how to meet a young person and make them feel safe soon. Mm-hmm. So there's lots. It's a sophisticated thing. In other words, at the same time, it's as simple sometimes as, a decent place to sleep. High safety, quiet, nutritious meals. Sometimes for the first time in their life, a doctor's appointment. Sometimes they haven't had one for a long time. Some of the basic things, and we tend to woo young people with some of those good things, including in Vancouver, 2 fantastic new buildings that are very cool and are, are very welcoming and look very welcoming and approachable.
I know it's cliche to say I'm going to overwhelm them with love, but in essence, in some ways, that's what you're saying. But it's a very complex equation, and it must have to be tailor-made for each child because everybody's life path is different.
100%, and that's why systems struggle with really transformational help of these young people, because systems don't love well.
No.
Number one. People do, but systems not necessarily. And also, systems tend to lump the systems like categories. They like to categorize or label particular populations, and they attach some kind of prescription with that label, and that's what you're going to get. You're going to get that dosage, that frequency, because you've been labeled as this thing. These are individual young people. They know BS when they hear it, and they know when a service is not right for them. Mm-hmm. I'll take your food, but the rest of this stuff is not what I need. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it can take months before a young person trusts us enough to A, accept any help, but B, to then take the next step. Once nutrition and safety and sleep and their immediate medical needs are met, now what? Okay,
right. Now you can start to move up the hierarchy of needs about where do you go. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, the question for a young person is, so where do you see yourself? What do you dream about? How would you get there? Well, I dream about this, but I have absolutely no idea how to get from where I am today to an architect or a doctor or a tradesperson or some of the things that kids just, dream about doing.
So why? What presents that challenge with for them to be able to envision a future and then to work towards it?
Well, we were talking off camera about what it's like to be someone who's hasn't been able to stop in survival mode long enough to actually contemplate what their next steps might be, because they're in constant survival mode. And, we're learning so much about brain science, right? And we know what the lizard brain is doing and how judgment just shuts off and you're operating out of straight survival. And so it's just one foot in front of the other, off and running.
Mm-hmm. It may be 5 or 10 minutes out, and that's about it.
Well, and these are young people too, right? So we know that their brains haven't finished developing until they're 25 years of age. So
on average.
Average, some of us a little later. But we're asking a young person who's detached from family, detached from systems, traumatized probably, not in great health, whose brain hasn't finished developing, their judgment center is not complete. Mm-hmm. And despite all that, they often, can pull it off. And sometimes they need a hand, so planning, attending school, showing up for jobs on time, all those things become very difficult because they haven't necessarily had experience with that, nor have they had role models that provide a picture of what that life might look like.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. In my introduction, I also indicated that we want to make sure that these people, young people, feel as though they are seen, that they're not invisible, because that goes so much to one's sense of self. And so how do you help to get them over that hurdle? Because if they've been on the street, they know what it's like to be invisible. How do you help them grow into that position where they go, I have a right to be here and to be seen?
It's a great question, and I think it's something that we all can relate to, because all of us are tempted to look away, right? I mean, when you see, it's so sad to see the people in living in conditions that we don't even know why, given that we have a social safety net here in Canada. Why is this young person or older person, living in the outdoors, exposed the way they are? I think we're all it's very hard for many of us, deeply saddening and frustrating too, because we don't know how to help. But, just sometimes the simple act of looking someone in the eye and saying, even though I don't have money to give you, or I can't do that for you, I see you.
Yeah.
Like literally make eye contact with someone. And, with a smile on your face, and with a good morning. And because lots of these folks don't even expect that, as to see it. But I'd say that, working with young people at Covenant House, often we convey that message not through words. Words are one thing, but actions are the other thing.
Right.
So, if again, following through on what you promised to do is something that's unusual often for a young person in these situations.
They're not used to people doing that.
They're not used to people doing what they say they're going to do. So we talk about, this is what we're going to offer you, and we do. So through walking through the door of a Covenant House site in Vancouver, there's an unspoken message. It's a beautiful space. You deserve a beautiful space, brackets. There's a person that comes and greets you, friendly, welcoming, non-judgmental, which says, I accept you. You are okay. You are welcome here. And we're happy that you're here. And we say that, we obviously do say that in words, but we say it in the way that we deliver services too, and the way that services look, and the beautiful food that we produce. I mean, we're not pulling a box out of a freezer and sticking it in a microwave. We actually take the time and employ staff in our own kitchens to create a beautiful, balanced, and beautiful looking meal consistently every single time they sit down for a meal. Those kinds of things are often say much more than words do about how we feel about them and what they deserve. So
in that, I hear, I respect you. And when you respect somebody, you set aside any minor differences that you have, and you find ways to work together and move forward. The benefit, and I think that it's incumbent upon all of us, is to recognize that the benefit to all of us is that if we play a role in helping somebody else realize their potential, not what we think their potential is, but their potential, the benefits are felt everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, and as any parent knows, if it's your idea, it's probably less of a good idea than if it's your kid's idea, right? It just is the way humans are made, and I think it's great. And once a young person understands what their options are, they choose great options, and they get to, at Covenant House, they get to explore. They'll meet someone who's practicing architecture. They have an opportunity to be mentored by somebody who's practicing architecture. What are the steps? How do you get to be an architect? What does it take? And, anyway, I could talk for days about the kinds of services that we offer that I think are part of a successful model. But there's probably some key pieces of the model that I would like people to understand need to be part of a successful service. So if I can talk about one of them, which may surprise you, maybe it won't surprise you, but it's the type of funding model that Covenant House has that I think has been a big part of the success of the organization. And I talk about funding models because, it's so challenging for some of my colleagues who are funded solely by or primarily by government contracts to be able to be agile enough and provide the dynamic kind of programs that are required, because government takes time to change its mind about the kind of contract work you will be doing to be paid by government. So policies change, funding requirements change, and people are sort of going guardrail to guardrail, trying to conform to the current policy preferences of the current government, which may last a year, 2 years, certainly never longer than 4 years.
Right, and may not necessarily be indicative of the needs.
Well, sometimes they are, absolutely, but they're not the only needs. And the thing is, an array, there's no silver bullet to this problem. This, getting back to the idea of wicked problems, there's an array of supports that need to be coordinated and delivered
Yeah.
where people are at. I mean, that basic concept makes sense to everybody, right?
Right.
But you know, as crises come and go, crack cocaine was a crisis that came and went, sort of. The fentanyl crisis obviously is with us and has, you know, maybe with us for a while. You know, governments do try to respond to those things as they emerge, but the government has a difficult time being agile.
Because they're not as agile.
Exactly.
Right.
So
what is it about the Covenant House funding model that gives you that freedom?
we fundraise to private individuals like you and I.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, our fundraising is to literally talk to thousands of people. You know, we have 50,000 individual donors that support Covenant House. And that's not an inexpensive exercise.
No.
We invest in fundraising because it produces the ability to be agile and develop the kind of programs that we need to develop to serve kids. And we've figured out a sustainable fundraising model that year after year after year, we can consistently deliver the kinds of programs that they need. We consistently staff the programs with staff that are qualified and very experienced because we haven't had to lay them off because the contract ended.
The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. What I like about this model is that it also gives a whole host of people who want to help, but feel that they can't step up with a significant amount. But there is also some benefit in the act of giving as well, that they then get to feel like they've been a part of different outcomes.
Yeah, it's as a fundraiser, you know, it's great to be a catalyst for that feeling with people. It's a beautiful thing to watch, you know, and to be able to bring people into proximity with young people who are receiving the benefit. Obviously, is quite wonderful to watch. We also had some very, you know, people of significant wealth who contribute to Covenant House as well, because they really see, as we all do, that when everybody's better off, everybody's better off. Exactly. And, you know, young people are great focus because they're young and they've still got their whole life ahead of them. And, you know, it's exciting to watch them transition into adulthood.
Well, I want to encourage anybody who's watching this to reach out and be a supporter of Covenant House because of the work that is being done to help young people at a very, very important point in their lives, and that can help them realize their potential. I think that it's something, as you say, when everybody is better off, everybody's better off. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that plug. I appreciate that. I know that everyone at Covenant House will appreciate that. At the very least, jump on the website, on the Covenant House Vancouver website, because there's great stories there about young people. You can read about the kinds of journeys that they've had and the kind of successes they've had.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm also going to say this, you know, many, many, many young people do very well at Covenant House. And then there's going to be a group of young people that don't.
Yes.
Okay. And that's a reality. And I like to talk about the reality of the world we work in because otherwise, you know, we're not talking about, we may be talking about the success stories, but we also need to talk about the kids who have bigger barriers to success. And some of them, you know, will probably require care for the rest of their life. It is ever thus, right? Mm-hmm. But probably, you know, I hate to throw, you know, put percentages in because they can fluctuate, but, you know, somewhere between 10 and 20%, sometimes some years as much as 30% of the young people we work with are likely to need support for the rest of their life, whether that's disability payments, you know, subsidized housing, or a fully, you know, full wrap of mental health support.
Well, let's make sure that they do have that support, because we do not want them to be forgotten and left. Well, we're seeing a horrible human experiment unfolding on the streets, not too far from the studio right now, and that's not humane. It's not caring for our fellow human being. Well,
experiment is an interesting word. Mm-hmm. You know, I think about the world of addictions these days, and there's so many different interventions that we're talking about in addictions, whether it's safe supply, harm reduction, some really kind of what would have been considered years ago, some pretty out there kind of solutions, knowing that these are experimental. We also are finding through experimentation that here's what's not working, but here's some of the things that are working.
Mm-hmm.
I think the public might get frustrated because they're not seeing instant results in some of this experimentation, and some of it really isn't working. But what we are discovering is that virtually none of these interventions work in isolation. They must work in a coordinated fashion with the other aspects of social benefit.
Right.
And another one of our challenges in Canada, I think, and in other jurisdictions as well, face the same problem, is this sort of disjointed coordination of services. I know you've heard that before from other folks, but I can't say enough about how important it is for to the success of the young people at Covenant House that they have one easy doorway to walk through, and all of a sudden there's an entire array of easy to access supports with someone to guide them along to say, well, you might want to start here, and we're looking at your literacy scores, and we're seeing that your literacy scores are iffy. Like, how was your school experience? Awful, because I was, I couldn't read, or I was streamed in from the Congo because that's where I lived, to being able to help. Okay, good. Walk through this door, young man. Mm-hmm. And we have a homework coach that will work with you to help you with your literacy skills, so that when you are taking your adult ed program, your reading is going to start to improve.
Right.
Here's another doorway. It's the dentist. The kid hasn't smiled for 5 years because his teeth are so poor.
Yeah.
And they literally haven't smiled for years and are embarrassed to smile. Try job hunting when your teeth are,
right.
rotten. So here's we're getting the sense that you're concerned about, your dental health. How would you feel about having some dental support? What's that? Well, introduce you to our volunteer dentist who will help you create a new smile. Wow, powerful stuff, right? Yeah. So an array of supports needs to be easy to access. Under one roof is probably functionally a great idea. At least coordinated, at least one person walking alongside that young person who can show them each one of those doors. It's called case management. It's not a new concept. It's just we don't fund it consistently.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing these insights, and I encourage everybody to have an open heart and see people for what their best can be. Whether they're young people or others who are struggling with challenges, we need to look after one another. Thank you.
Thank you.